Chapter 1. Lone Cat in the Endless Wilderness. In the boundless expanse of Montana, where the horizon fades into a white haze of snow and the wind howls like a pack of hungry coyotes, lived a Palace's cat named Rocky. He wasn't named that by people. The wild cat had no owners to give him a name. This name was born in his soul, in that stubborn and untamed corner that made him survive where others would give up. Palace's cats aren't the kind of felines that warm themselves by the fireplace or cuddle up to hands. They are children of the wilderness, as harsh as the freezing nights and as independent as the mountain rivers that carve their way through stone. Rocky was one of them, small but sturdy, with thick fur like a snowdrift and round eyes that reflected the entire wilderness, its beauty and its cruelty. The winter of 2025 in Montana was relentless. Frosts plunged to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and even the pines that had stood here for centuries creaked from the cold, as if lamenting their fate. Rocky was born in a den under the roots of an old tree, where his mother, an experienced and wise Palace's cat, protected him from the world. She was called Cleo, for the cunning and agility with which she hunted. She taught Rocky everything: how to find mice under a thick layer of snow, how to hide from hawks circling in the gray sky, how to move silently so as not to become prey. Her fur was slightly darker than Rocky's, with gray undertones, and her eyes were deep like mountain lake pools. But one day, Cleo didn't return. It was in early December, when the sun barely peaked above the horizon, leaving the world in twilight. Rocky waited for her all night, curled up in a ball in their den. The wind howled above the pine, covering the entrance with snow, and he listened to every rustle, hoping to hear his mother's soft steps. In the morning, when hunger and anxiety became unbearable, he crawled outside. Cleo's tracks led to a small glade where the snow was trampled and stained with blood. Rocky froze, his small heart constricted with horror. His mother lay there, motionless, with frozen eyes that no longer saw the world. Her pelt was half-skinned, and nearby lay human boot prints and empty shell casings. Poachers. These ruthless shadows of the wilderness had taken Cleo for her fur, leaving Rocky alone. He was only 6 months old, an age when a Palace's cat is not yet ready for independent living. Winter was breathing down his neck, and every day became a trial. But deep within Rocky's soul burned a fire, the very one he inherited from his mother. He decided to fight. His paws trembled from the cold, his fur became covered in frost, but he raised his head and went forward, leaving behind a thin chain of tracks in the snow. Chapter 2. Tracks in the Snow. The first days of solitude were like an endless nightmare. Rocky wandered through the wilderness searching for food, but winter had hidden all living things under an icy crust. Mice burrowed deep into their holes, birds flew south, and the small hares that Cleo had taught him to track became invisible in the white sea of snow. Hunger gnawed at him from within, sharp and merciless as a hawk's talons. Rocky tried to dig through the snow, but his paws quickly grew tired, and prey slipped away. He was too small, too weak to survive alone. On the third day, he noticed tracks, not animal tracks, those he knew from birth. The wide paws of wolves, the light prints of foxes, the deep hoof prints of deer. These tracks were different, even with a clear pattern of soles. Human. They led over the hills to where a thin wisp of smoke rose in the frosty air. Rocky froze, flattening his ears. Cleo had warned him about humans. They bring death, she had said, and her words were now confirmed by the bloody spot in the glade. But something inside told him, there, beyond the hills, there might be food, warmth, salvation. Hunger was stronger than fear, and Rocky followed the tracks. The path was long and arduous. The snow reached his chest, and every step sapped his strength. The wind lashed at his face, covering his eyes with snow dust, and the frost bit through to his bones despite his thick fur. Rocky moved slowly but stubbornly, like a small furry tank. He didn't know where he was going, but the smoke in the sky was his beacon, a faint, trembling hope in the white desert. On the second day of his journey, he met a fox. Her red fur flashed among the bare bushes, and Rocky pressed himself to the ground, fluffed up his fur, and hissed. The fox was thin, her ribs protruded beneath her coat, and her eyes gleamed with hungry fire. She circled him, sniffing, her tail twitching nervously. Rocky understood. She was deciding if he was worth the risk. He growled, baring his small but sharp teeth, and the fox backed away. Apparently, she decided the prey was too small to fight for. She left, dissolving into the snowy haze, and Rocky remained alone. It was a first victory, but it brought no joy, only exhaustion and even greater longing for his mother. Chapter 3. Dance with Wolves. On the third day of his journey, Rocky heard a howl. Low, drawn out, it echoed across the wilderness, making the palace's cat freeze. Wolves. Their silhouettes appeared between the pines, gray shadows, fast and silent as ghosts. There were 3 of them. A large alpha with a gray muzzle, and 2 younger ones whose eyes burned with yellow fire. Rocky realized he had become their target. He darted to run, but the snow was too deep and his paws too short. The wolves were gaining on him. Their breath could be heard behind him. The crunch of snow under their paws sounded like the drumbeat of death. Rocky darted between the trees, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. He noticed a low-hanging cedar branch and, gathering his last strength, jumped. Claws dug into the bark, fur clung to the branches, but he climbed up. The wolves surrounded the tree, their muzzles rising toward him, jaws opening, showing sharp fangs. The alpha jumped, snapping his teeth near Rocky's tail. The palace's cat hissed, fluffed up, trying to appear bigger than he was. His small body trembled, but he didn't give up. The wolves waited. They knew the prey wouldn't get far. The cold intensified, and Rocky felt his strength leaving him. He could fall right into their paws, and then it would all be over. But fate gave him a chance. Somewhere in the distance, a crackle of branches and a muffled roar sounded. Perhaps it was a deer or a bear, awakened by the noise. The wolves became alert, their ears twitched, and the alpha gave a short growl. They rushed off in that direction, leaving Rocky alone. He jumped down from the branch, nearly falling into a snowdrift, and ran without looking back. His paws burned with fatigue, but he knew to stop meant to die. Chapter 4. The Trap. 2 days later, Rocky reached a river. Ice covered it with a thick layer, reflecting the gray sky, and on the bank stood a strange construction, a metal cage sprinkled with snow. It smelled of food. Hunger was stronger than fear, and Rocky approached closer. Inside lay a piece of meat, fresh, with a still warm scent of blood. He took a step, then another, and suddenly a click sounded. The cage slammed shut, and Rocky found himself trapped. He lunged at the bars, scratched the metal with his claws, beat against it with his whole body, but all in vain. The iron was cold and unyielding. Rocky hissed, his eyes darting in search of an exit, but there was no exit. Cold seeped inside. His fur no longer saved him, and strength left him with every movement. He curled up in a ball, trembling from fear and frost, and closed his eyes. In the distance, human voices were heard, rough with hoarse laughter. Poachers? Rocky remembered his mother, her motionless body in the snow, and prepared for the worst. But instead of rough hands and a sharp knife, he heard the steps of one person. It was Ethan, a park ranger, patrolling his territory. Tall, with a beard covered in frost, he stopped at the cage and squatted down. "Well, little guy, got yourself into trouble," he said quietly, almost gently. Rocky hissed, fluffed up his fur, but there was no threat in the man's voice. Ethan opened the cage and carefully took out the palace's cat, wrapping him in his warm jacket. Rocky was too weak to resist and only looked at the ranger with his round eyes, full of distrust. Chapter 5. New home. Ethan brought Rocky to his cabin on the edge of the village. Inside, it smelled of firewood, pine resin, and soup simmering on the stove. The ranger placed the palace's cat by the fire, where warmth slowly returned to his frozen body. Rocky lay motionless, listening to the crackling of the firewood and the rustling of the man. Ethan brought a bowl with pieces of meat and placed it in front of him. Rocky stared at the food for a long time, but hunger overcame fear. He grabbed a piece and began to chew, not taking his eyes off the ranger. Days passed, and Rocky recovered. Ethan named him Rocky for the resilience and wild spirit that read in his gaze. He didn't lock up the palace's cat, leaving the door open, but Rocky didn't leave. The warmth of the stove, the smell of food, Ethan's quiet voice, all this became a new world for him, so far from the icy wilderness. Sometimes he went outside, hunted mice in the shed, but always returned. Ethan became not an owner, but a friend, the first person who gave him hope. Epilogue. Symbol of survival. Rocky stayed with Ethan. His story spread throughout the village, and people began to talk about Palace's cats as a symbol of strength and rebirth. In Russia, these cats are still under threat, but encounters like the one between Rocky and Ethan remind us, even in a harsh world, there is room for kindness. Rocky was no longer alone. His fluffy fur gleamed in the sun, and his eyes looked to the future with quiet confidence.